named Nistor. I'm a surveyor at BHP in West Australian iron ore asset. I started BHP 7 years ago as a graduate, progressed through various surveying roles, being in mining operations and exploration. At the moment, I'm split between half my time being in the Pilbara and half my time being in Perth, supporting the survey team and various people on the ground, whilst also assisting with various projects that have survey interests. So, today, I'm hoping to talk about competencies and what BHP are doing to prepare surveyors for the future. Now, I think everybody knows that the surveying environment is changing. It's adapting relative to the introduction of new technologies, whether it be small or big. But with that comes, as Chris mentioned, these massive data sets, which can, to a lot of people, be intimidating. So, we cover that in terms of platforms that we not only have to give to our clients in terms of how they receive the data, but also, what are the clients wanting? Chris also alluded to pretty much real time or as close to a live data set as possible. Now that's something new, people want that, but what are surveyors capable of? Does that sit within the realm of a surveyor, or does it change into a spatial specialist? There's obviously risks inherent with it. Surveyors, they start taking too many responsibilities, what do we do? But then also, from the company's point of view, how do we make sure that all of the surveyors, all specialists, whoever they're all on the same level? BHP in the West Australian iron ore business, we have large operations covering large areas, and this is similar for other major players in the iron ore industry. But now, you talk about the East Coast, you talk about down south of WA, you start to include all these professionals in the same. So how are we making sure that everybody's prepared on a similar boat, knowledge sharing? Because in the end, it's the business that benefits. And even when you talk about including what is the industry doing, the session we had this morning with around the regulations, making sure that everybody is operating on a relevant and an actual basis relevant to what we should be doing as a whole as a profession. So it looks beyond just the business application. So, I'm going to quickly do this. BHP, I imagine most people know what BHP is, but yes, it is a global resource company. Now, in West Australia alone, we have iron ore, nickel, and we also have gas operations. You include that in with the ones in South Australia, on the East Coast, but there are also global assets. And it's about making sure that all those encompass with the technologies and also systems that are developing. So with regards to what BHP wants to do, it's a case of having everybody collaboratively working together, because the future comes under what we define as three categories. These should be not unfamiliar to anybody that's in the surveying or the spatial sciences background. These three categories, capture, analysis, and publication, are the same. However, what falls under them is different. Machine guidance, albeit it's been around for a while, but in terms of how prevalent it is in the operations these days, that's the difference. Autonomous haulage, you have different systems for capturing data, including them in these digital twins or these large data sets. You also have robotics as well. They go away from just using GNS technology into other things. So what about when it comes to analysts? You're analysing data, massive data sets coming from all these different sources. You're not going to have individuals looking at everything that comes through the door. You're going to have systems that filter out the erroneous data. You're going to have systems which automatically draw on from these data sets. But you also have to have queries. There are going to be obviously certain things that you want to focus on, whether it be inventory reports or maybe even safety applications. Machine learning, again, what Chris alluded to before, but is, best way that we're going forward is that you will have systems and computations that go through and will do this for people. But publication, this is for the clients. What is the client wanting? Something that's paper version? Some people are old school. Some people like to see the visualization of something on the wall. That's still applicable, but people want to now have them on their mobile phones, in the field. They want to have this virtual reality. And it's about how can we work towards making sure that these applications are being applied, which they are, from various projects that are running, and I know of a number from various companies in Australia. But what about the surveyor's involvement in that? In all these, how does the surveyor fit into it? Because a future surveyor, it's not one that's going to be sitting in the field. I think most people would know these days that a lot of the work, a lot of the time that we have sits in the office. There's various reasons for that. Safety being a big one, especially in the iron ore industry, and I imagine with all mining operations. You want to take your personnel out of the line of fire. How do you do that? Stop having interactions with various equipment, which could result in fatalities and stuff. Remote sensing is becoming much more widely used, and that falls into it with when you have these different platforms for capturing data, RPADs, terrestrial laser scans. I know there's going to be a few different presentations about laser scans. These are massive data sets that don't need the surveyor to be there on the ground. And when it comes to post-processing this, putting it into these massive data sets, are we sure that the surveyors are being responsible? Are they being truthful in the way that they're reporting on what data is ending up in that data set? Usually we have a standard that you would apply, whether it be for regulatory purposes or purely for accounting, internal. Now, what is attached to those data sets? Is there the metadata behind it? Was it captured of the bucket position of an excavator? Or was it done relative to a laser scan, a series of laser scans that were all joined together and then pushed as one massive data set? It's two different sources. Maybe they work to the same standard, maybe they don't. But it's about understanding where it goes, because when you have less time of being on the equipment, being in the office, you need to be able to understand the use of the equipment, because no longer do we have surveyors running around with a GNSS receiver on stick. However, it does still occur. It doesn't happen as often as what it used to. A lot of that technology has been replaced by being slapped on the back of a dozer. It's the exact same limitations, considerations, all that. However, what happens if the comms network goes down 24 hours? The survey still needs to be initiated to go back there, maybe get out the old peg bag, dust off the tapes, and run out there and do it. So you need to keep this relevance, because when it comes down to illustrating to somebody that these technologies, the way that we're progressing forward, is, it's amazing from my point of view of how I've seen it develop, but from the point of view that when you have to explain to somebody, you have to explain to a mining supervisor, you have to explain to a manager of what are the risks involved. The surveyor needs to be knowledgeable in understanding, from the geomatics point of view, how important it is. They need to communicate that through influence in some ways about how critical the surveyor's role is in making sure that it befits some of the problems and the shortcomings that occur in mining. And with that, this is, it's applying to the business needs, geomatics or geodetic capabilities and communication skills to find those solutions. This is what is probably most prevalent. Surveyors don't have that presence now, but they still need to have the push out. So with that, you have risks to the roles. Now we've already found with some of the competencies which we've put together, and then the way that we've organised our team, that there have become some things that are much more prevalent. Now, the jack of all trades. You have potentially a single surveyor that may be responsible for an operation that moves 60 million tonnes of iron ore a year. A single surveyor. They still have all the responsibilities that were there 10 years ago, albeit a lot of those have been replaced by machine guidance and so forth. Inventory reporting, you've not got people on the ground to get drones. You can cover multiple stockpiles in the morning rather than having to have a collection of team running around for an entire day. But with that, it's that limited exposure, the infrequencies. So you get these capabilities which are underutilized. People aren't looking into, so you can just go out there and do it right away. Or, no, I haven't actually been tasked with this for 6 months. What about digi-level? Somebody that's been sitting using a UAV still has digi-level in the background. Have they even calibrated? Do they even know it works? There's a process of, it's not something that you can just pick up and run with. Albeit that there is procedures, there's usually different documentations that support how should we do it. Making sure that these are up to date relative to how things are progressing. Within BHP, we do a pretty good job, following up or making sure they are relevant. However, how does it fit in with other departments? Other departments including survey and nets. So it's making sure there is this presence, because in many cases it's the experience that the surveyor has from what they fit versus what people expect from them. So this is where it comes into pivotal experience. Are people seeing different operations? They may be at one site, they see how things are done. However, there may be another operation down the road which has advanced systems that have been trialled, suddenly get turned on. Everybody else is expected to pick it up. Have the personnel flowed around, have they shared that knowledge, making sure it's captured. But when it comes down to it, what is the surveyor's contribution? What is it that happens when the surveyor is not included in a conversation that relates to spatial technologies? And the digital twins are great examples of where a lot of people just see the data appearing. They understand maybe the source it comes from, but they don't understand what are when they get these anomalies, these tumours in this data set, and they just think, this doesn't exist in reality. Who's there to explain to them that, in this part it's not valid, but in these parts it is. There is still value in that, albeit not all completely to standard of what was expected. So with the survey's contribution to that, how do we make sure everybody's right? Competencies. Now I think everybody is familiar with competencies and what it is, but how do you make sure that you've got the competencies that are relevant to this changing of the surveying environment, the spatial sciences, the technical side? The first thing is, what's the business need? Day to day. What's the business need? Make sure it's captured. What about, not day to day, but maybe once or twice a year? What does the business need? Making sure that those are also included. Making sure that if they're not the fit of one mine, it is still being tested and captured in another, whether it be through fictitious environments or tasks, whatnot. Because then it comes into what makes the surveyor. Do they know how to fully use the capabilities of the equipment? Because it comes into, well, you use your phone every day. You know how the phone works, but do you understand all those background processes, stuff like that? So if you aren't even fully utilising the equipment to the full extent, are you making sure that you're keeping relevant with that equipment? If new technology is introduced, are you making sure that you understand the full capabilities of it? Also the restrictions. You may be getting something that's faster, but is it necessarily more accurate? Behavioural. So this comes down to survey's presence. We need to support any of our team. If we have people who are struggling to keep up with the workload, people who are not understanding how to get along with other groups, you need to have this supportive nature. But you cannot shortcut. You cannot let these standards slide. You cannot let these things which people have come to rely on, which albeit you don't have that same presence, it needs to still be just as professional. It needs to be just as monumentous in regards to how everything works. That comes into making sure that people are confident with what they're doing. They know exactly what needs to go out there. Effective communication, and also being those knowledge data custodians. Again, the people are seeing these platforms in which they're getting data which they know isn't consistent because maybe it was an automated process, making sure they understand who they go to talk about that, who they go to raise it to quickly fix it. Lots of things happen. It's progressing to be a more complete process, but there are still always shortcomings. So when it comes down to making sure that we are befitting what we need to, this needs to come from within the team, the surveyors, and also those people who are related to spatial tasks and roles need to define what the competencies are. If you want to make it something that has longevity, that has relevance, that has applicable nature, you need to make sure that you listen, you apply, and that comes from people who are coming and doing presentations and so other teams which are selling these new roles, which that has some spatial capabilities, making sure that somebody heard this, somebody saw this, somebody was part of this project, that it does fit into making sure it's shared. Because the framework that you would define to keep everybody to some benchmark that we hope will change over time. But if you want people to work to it, want people to develop on it, they have to have some investments, making sure, especially when it comes to training, that you are utilising those people who are genuinely interested in certain aspects of the roles. Some people love to be pilots. have a greater interest in UAVs. Other people prefer the processing side. And there are others who prefer in the field. Now, when you have limited amount of staff that are working within your operations, not everything can be fit, but making sure that you do involve those people who can contribute on a greater scale. Because it comes down to, with competencies that are valid, that are relevant, that are comprehensive in their nature, it adds value. And at the end of the day, that's what businesses are for. They want you to do these things, they want you to run with them so that you can contribute in a positive way to the operation and to how the business runs. I mean, whether it's a universal nature, maybe, for surveyors. I think there's a lot of tools that are used across not only within a single company, but within the industry as a whole. In confirming, what's the purpose of survey. It may not appear to be the same as what it used to be, but it still has those principles underlying it. So making sure that the business understands that, and then also, the supporting nature. What does it do from a management point of view? What does it do from like a mine manager? When they have a question in regards to a certain plan or a map or some other data set, especially when it comes to inventory reporting. Do they just think, oh, it's a figure that's to this nth degree? No. Because it comes down to, what about the industry? What about go beyond, like BHP or a single operation? Look at the industry as a whole, whether it be above ground, underground. But still, you have to strive towards having safe operations. You still have to tell people that if things aren't here the same, like the weather conditions, you can't fly the drone, but people still want an inventory tape. They're looking at something to do with maybe the location of an excavator. Oh, well, you want to pick up at the face or anything like that. In a laser scanner, maybe you have to shut down the area. No, we can't shut down for production. Making sure you still have the drive to, there's still things in place. Systems. If you want something, what's it worth? Because when it comes to the quality and provenance, it's this thing that has. What if we were to stop what we do? From a surveying perspective, what happens if we just shut off or we let things slide? It goes into, maybe it rides for a little bit, people don't notice, but eventually there will become these gaps, these voids, and people are now becoming this nature of thinking, oh, a live data set is valid for 15 minutes, and they're disappointed when they don't see something for maybe 4 hours. Back in the day, when you got a request, it may have been 48 hours before you turned around the survey data. That was a requirement, but if people are getting disappointed at not seeing something that's not accurate for 3 hours. But were we informed? Was that standard? No. But that's where you have to make sure that you understand where does that fall into the whole bigger picture. Because I think the last one is the professional. Professional from our involvement with what the business wants, but also understanding what is a surveyor, what is a mine surveyor when it comes to befitting regulations, befitting the requirements of the business, understanding the responsibilities of people. Yeah. So I mean, I did have this question up here: will the surveying being taken out of the surveyor? I don't think so. I think a lot of people have approached this question, and from what I've said, there are certain elements that have been removed from what a survey does. They've been given to other platforms, they've been given to other capabilities, but underneath the principles of the survey still remain vital, if not invaluable, to the operations. And that's supporting all the technical and also the mining aspects, the production side. Because when all this is changing, the surveyor needs to look beyond, but at the same time they still need to fit those little gaps. They need to be the bridge between the physical world and the digital world. You need to make sure that from the business point of view that we have adequately supported our surveyors, the team, that if somebody were to ask something that was ad hoc or maybe not as frequent, that they are still able to walk out the door and fit that. Because with competencies, aligned to what we have in the values of the company, the strategic outlook, that's when everything flows. That's when it all comes together to make, the seamless process, which one, you feel that you're happy to be proud to be a surveyor because you are having a contribution to what goes on. At the same time, the business is happy that you are keeping things going as the environment is changing in quite a rapid rate. that's competencies from us. Does anybody have any questions?
Matt, one of the challenges that we face as an academic institution is keeping up to date with these competencies. What in your mind, what's the best way that we can do that to make sure that we're putting out surveyors who fit the requirements of the real world?
I think when it comes down to, especially from academics, you're preparing students for what's going forward. I feel that there needs to be more transparency with graduate programs when it comes down to what is offered from the business point of view, flowing back into how academic bodies and institutes prepare those students. I feel like there is a distinct gap in that regard, which for me, when I first got into this industry was quite confronting, albeit, I enjoyed the challenge straight up, but it would have been nice to have some lead in. So
a feedback loop almost.
In some ways, and whether that comes in the form of there being a greater prominence in vacation students or various sort of programs that are offered to have students exposed before they leave. At the same time, it also could be a greater involvement with the academic staff, to make sure, it is that loop, it is that feedback. I mean, it's the same with how we update competencies. It's, we've only gone through the first iteration, but it will forever be changing. So I don't see any reason why, especially when you look at it from the industry, the professional industry. I feel it should be that way. Depends how other people see it and are willing to share, but I mean, it's important, especially if you want people to hit the ground running. If you have greater requirements on graduates having more responsibilities straight away, you want them to be as well informed straight up.
Thanks, Matt.